Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Perrone, International President of the UFCW. Let me begin by thanking all of our UFCW members for taking part in this important conversation with U.S. Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. Since the beginning of this pandemic, our 1.3 million members have been on the front lines. These essential workers have literally put their lives on the line to help feed, care, and serve this country. These essential workers, many who are parents, have been confronted with the additional challenge of not only having to take care of their children as they adapt to virtual learning, but they also had to do so without the ability to work from home. Again and again, throughout this pandemic, these essential workers rose to the challenges that they and our nation faced. And we've made it clear to all those in positions of power that the sacrifices of our members and all of America's essential workers and what they've made should never be forgotten. These incredible men and women and parents helped this nation to weather the greatest public health crisis that we've faced in over a century. Now, as the nation begins to slowly emerge from this pandemic, our members with children have questions about what will come next, specifically with the respect to the education of their children. Like so many parents, our members depend on America's public schools to provide good education and to help their children reach the full potential. And we want to know what's on your mind about getting the kids back to school. As we wait for more members to join us online, Karen, we have a few polling questions that we want to ask. Would you mind going through that for us?
Thank you so much, Mark. So with this short poll, if you are joining us via the phone, please press the number that corresponds to the best answer that relates to your experience. If you're joining us on Facebook, please go ahead and put your comments right in the chat. We would love to hear from you. So please press 1 if making sure that kids stay healthy when they go back to school this fall is your most important concern. Please press 2 if making sure that children who may have fallen behind academically get the support they need to make up for lost educational growth. Press 3 if there is a COVID-19 resurgence this fall, what will be done to keep our children in school safe in a healthy environment. Please press 4 for those who want to continue with virtual education, making sure that that is still an option. Please press 5 if your concern is support for children dealing with pandemic trauma and stress. Again, if you are just joining us, we're doing a brief poll. Please press the button on your phone that best corresponds to your answer. If you're joining us on Facebook, please put your concerns in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So please press 1 if making sure that kids stay healthy when going back to school this fall is your #1 concern. Please press 2 if making sure that children who may have fallen behind academically get the support they need to make up for lost educational growth. Please press 3 if there is a COVID-19 resurgence this fall, what will be done to keep our children in school in a safe, healthy environment. Please press 4 for those who want to continue with virtual education, making sure that is still an option. Please press 5 if support for children dealing with pandemic trauma is your #1 issue. Okay, Mark, turning it back to you as the results come in.
Thank you very much, Karen. Our members want and need our schools to reopen. Balancing home and work and school is hard for most, but it's even harder when you have to work because you've been deemed essential. As we've heard, they want to know how the Biden administration plans to reopen our public schools, how it will work, when it'll happen, and the potential issues or challenges that could come from that. But most importantly, they need to know how their loved ones are going to be kept safe and protected. To answer these kinds of questions, we are very fortunate to be joined by Education Secretary Cardona. Secretary Cardona is not just the nation's most important voice on education, He is a passionate advocate for our public schools and our children. As a former elementary school teacher and principal, he knows full well that a good education can change lives, the lives of this generation and the next. He is a strong advocate of the unique role and responsibility our schools have to embrace our nation's diversity and to teach our children regardless of their backgrounds. He believes, as we all must, the importance of equity and excellence for all, not just a chosen few. And as Connecticut's Commissioner on Education, he led the effort to address the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic head on. He implemented strong measures to ensure that our children were educated even as our schools shut down. He worked on policies and practices that helped define how our schools could open safely. As a teacher, a principal, administrator, and now President Biden's national leader for education, Secretary Cardona believes that education, safety, and health of our children is a must come first. So, Secretary Cardona, thank you for being here. My members look forward to hearing your vision, your ideas, and how the administration plans to safely reopen our schools for in-person learning.
Thank you very much, President Perron, for representing the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union and for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. But you know, your vision for empowering the workers and their voice is critical to understanding how unions can transform the lives of workers. So thank you for what you do. To the 1.3 million men and women of UFCW, thank you. You are essential workers, and I don't mean it in the terms of the pandemic. I really mean it. You know, when the rest of the country was shutting down, you had to walk into what many people were walking away from to make sure that things continued. And I remember that I was Commissioner of Education at the time, and last March and April, daily calls with the governor, with the health director in Connecticut, just talking about what we're noticing and what's spreading, and then thinking, wow, there's so many folks that don't have the option of working from home, and that's you. And I just want to say thank you for your courage, your keeping us moving as a country during the most difficult time, I would imagine, not only for you as employees, but personally, because as was mentioned before, you have families, you know, you have children, and you want to make sure that you're safe and that your families are safe. So thank you for what you've done over the last year and a half in particular, but what you always do. I'm honored to be here with you in support of you. And I want to also applaud UFCW's citizenship clinics that really help to get the legal permanent residents to apply to become U.S. citizens and become voters. That's critically important that that process continue as well. So thanks for what you've done to facilitate that process. As I mentioned, you know, you've been there, you've been the frontline workers during the pandemic, and I want to say thank you for your commitment. And gracias para servir nuestras comunidades. They needed you, and you were there. You were there. So a little bit about myself, and then a little bit about the priorities. First and foremost, as the president mentioned, yes, I was an educator, fourth grade teacher, principal, assistant superintendent. The governor called for me to serve as commissioner, and then this pandemic thing happened. And then, you know, education is a great equalizer. It was for me. And we knew how important it was to make sure we provide a safe option for in-person learning, because as much as learning online helped keep some students connected, we know that for so many of our students, there is no replacement for in-person learning, especially our students with disabilities, where the computer just doesn't cut it. So yes, I'm an educator, but first and foremost, my favorite title is Papi. The favorite letters after my name is SR. Because that means that I have children, and my daughter who's 15, my son who's 16. Those are my priority. And just like you, I would never put them in harm's way. And so I needed to make sure that the decisions that I made as Commissioner of Education or Secretary of Education are decisions that I would make for my own two children who attend public school, where I taught, the same community, and my wife who works in two middle schools. Their safety is the priority for me. So I want to make sure that I make it very clear that the decisions and the communication that I have about how we're going to keep schools open, my family's lives depend on it too. So I'm with you on that. I grew up I always say I was born rich, but I didn't have a lot of material possessions. And my father got a good paying union job, and that thrusted us into the middle class. And I recognize the importance of supporting our unions and working with our unions, to make sure that the conditions are good and they're safe. Never has that been more important than this past year. The priorities, reopening schools as quickly and as safely as possible. For so many of our students, schools are more than where they learn how to read and write and do math. It's a safe community. It's a caring community. Many of our students eat 2 warm meals in our schools. They have access to a nurse. They have access to mental health support where it's needed. So for me, schools are more than just places to learn how to do math and write. And it's critically important that we provide in-person learning as quickly as possible. The American Rescue Plan, which the President and Congress pushed and passed, provides funds so that we make sure that our schools are safer. We make sure that they're ready for reopening. And what that means is that our ventilation system should be up to par. They should be working to have good air quality, that we have enough clean facilities. So much came out during the pandemic of how horrible some conditions were in some schools that are 150 years old, where there's poor ventilations, the windows are shut and they're painted shut, and they haven't been given attention. So these things have come out. The American Rescue Plan can help that. It can also help to make sure that we're not laying off educators, because our students need more now, not less. So, and making sure that our students have that social and emotional well-being support, school counselors, social workers, psychologists. I don't have to tell you that in many communities where there are frontline workers who couldn't stay home and work, we saw higher levels of COVID-19 transmission. We saw higher levels of sickness. We saw higher levels of death. So what we're experiencing is that in these same communities, we're having a harder time getting students back in the classroom. So we need to double down our efforts with the American Rescue Plan to make sure we're getting them in our schools and giving them the support that they need, including that social and emotional and mental health support that we know our students who've experienced trauma need. We also know that in the budget that the president proposed, which includes the American Family Plan, it includes building back better. It's better than what it was in March 2020 with education, which means that we're supporting free pre-kindergarten classes for students. As a parent, you know how important those experiences are for 3 and 4-year-olds. And if those students don't have that experience, it's more likely that they're going to need intervention later. So giving parents an option for students to come in as a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old to get those skills and that socialization that they need is critically important. But it's also important so parents have the opportunity to go into the workforce. This pandemic affected women and underrepresented groups more. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we provide opportunities to help lift up those groups as best we can. 2 years of free community college for everyone to go back and get those skills that they want to get to continue the upward mobility and the ladder of opportunity that's available to them through this American Families Plan. We need to close gaps that were exacerbated by the pandemic. So the $20 billion increase in Title I is unprecedented. What it's going to do is make sure that the schools that are in greatest need have the most resources to get smaller class sizes, reading support for students that were sitting in front of a computer for a year, more activities that are hands-on, giving students a chance to learn while socializing. I visited some schools over the last 3 months, and I had a first grade teacher tell me that when her students came back in, they didn't know how to socialize because they were looking at a computer for a year. They didn't even know that they could look to the left or look to the right and see another student. They were fixated on the teacher because for a year they were staring at a computer screen. We have a lot of work to do. Yes, it's been a challenging year and a half, but I'm confident that with the president's urgency and with the support of Congress with these bills, we can and move forward better than we were before. This is our opportunity now to make sure that we reopen our schools safely and make them better than they ever were before, because our students deserve it. So with that, let me turn it back over to you, because I believe we're going to have some questions. Looking forward to it.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. Our first member is Jessica Khalid. Jessica works at a hog slaughter facility in Perry, Iowa at Tyson's. She's a walking steward for the plant. She provides her fellow 1,155 union members with the support they need and works with Tyson to address the following or her fellow members' concerns. She's a mother of 7. She's single. Her kids keep her very busy. They range from age 4 to 21. Jessica, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mark, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Secretary Cardona. Well, this year has been a trying one for my family. In April of 2020, my entire family, including myself, came down with COVID-19, so I know how bad this disease can be. I'm also not the only essential worker in my family. 2 of my sons work in a nursing home. My baby, my 4-year-old, will be going to kindergarten this fall. I made the difficult decision to send my kids back to school in person this past year because I was afraid of them falling behind in virtual learning. We struggled with virtual learning when schools closed down in the spring of 2020. Up until the last few days of school, children needed to mask, but with the new CDC guidelines, the school dropped the mask requirement for kids and teachers alike. I still insist my kids wear their masks. We know that everyone will not be vaccinated for a whole host of reasons this fall when kids return to school. I'm concerned about the safety procedures that will be in place to keep children healthy, especially when there are no requirements about masking. What safety measures will be put in place to keep our kids safe this fall?
Thank you for that question, Jessica, and for the work that you've done. I mean, why can't we learn from the experiences we had, especially in slaughter facilities or in place meatpacking, where we knew following the guidelines help protect lives, right? So I understand your concern, and your concerns bring out the poll responses, right? So the questions that were asked, 37% of you wanted to hear about kids staying healthy when going back to school, and then 37% of you wanted to know, how do we help kids that are falling behind because of their being out? So your question really points to that. I can tell you right now, and it's really about making sure we build confidence that your children are safe. As I said before, as a father, I wouldn't do anything for my own children, for your children, that I wouldn't do for mine. I require my daughter, who's not vaccinated, to wear masks to school because she's not eligible yet. If she got her first shot, not her second, she's wearing a mask to school. And for me, I don't want her around other children that are not vaccinated if she doesn't have a mask. We're not out of the woods yet. So you're absolutely right. I think it's a mistake not to follow CDC guidance, especially in those younger years where the kids are not yet vaccinated. So I think it's important for you to know that it's our responsibility to make sure that our buildings are safe. We're going to work closely with our health and safety experts. So CDC, I'm in conversation with Dr. Walensky, and I'm following the advice of the health experts. This is a health pandemic, right? So health and safety have to drive every decision that I make. So as I mentioned earlier, American Rescue Plan provides funds for PPEs. So students have access to PPEs, cleaning supplies where needed, ventilation improvements where they're needed. And I can tell you, Jessica, I've seen schools that haven't had their ventilation system looked at in years prior to the pandemic. So now they need money to make sure that it's up and running. So those are some of the things that we're doing, that we're funding to make sure that the reentry to school is safe. Like you, I sent my children to school since the beginning of the school year, but I watch very carefully to make sure that their school is following the mitigation strategies. And as a parent, I think that's your responsibility to do that as well. It's our responsibility to make sure that we're giving good guidance, but it's all of our responsibility to do our part to make sure schools are safe. Thank you, Jessica, for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We have another question from Brittany from Pennsylvania. It was posted. She's a member of Local 152. She's a single mother. She's had her hours cut drastically during the pandemic to stay at home with her kids. What do you think may be done financially to help working parents who are juggling childcare, virtual schooling, and trying to work as well?
What was her name? Is it Brittany?
Brittany. Mhm.
Yeah, Brittany. So first of all, Brittany, thank you. I can only imagine how difficult it has been for you. Trying to juggle everything, trying to be the teacher, the parent, and handle everything you have to do. So to all the parents that have had to juggle so many different things, thank you. I know how difficult it can be to have to handle all that on your own, and this has been a trying year. So I just want to commend all the families out there, all the parents that have worked really hard to try to make everything work, everything possible with this pandemic. But what I can tell you is, part of the family's plan, the push is really to get pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds, to give parents an opportunity to go into the workforce, not to mention the benefit that it helps with the children when they go to school, but also the child care credit that the president is proposing for families to make sure, again, that we cut poverty in half. And these are programs that are intended to support families, working families, families that are trying to get back into the workforce, to get out of this pandemic. So there are many different things. The USDA's flexibilities to make sure that we can provide meals to students. One of the first things, Brittany, that we did in March of 2020 was mobilize our food service programs and say we need to get food in the hands of students, regardless of where they are. If they're in our cafeteria, if they're in our front lobby, if they're in our playgrounds, or if they're at their home, we have to get food to them. So there were a ton of flexibilities provided by the USDA in partnership with the Department of Education. We plan to keep those flexibilities as long as we need to make sure that children have their basic needs met. But we're going to continue to work hard to provide that support for people like you, Brittany, because we know you need it. We know you deserve it because of all the work that you've been doing to support your children through this pandemic.
Thank you, Secretary. Our next member is Eduardo Alvarado. Eduardo doesn't look like he could be a 30-plus union member, but he is. He's been working at King Soopers since he was 16 years old, and it's a family affair. His mother and daughters also work for King Soopers and are members of Local 7R. Eduardo has done just about every job over the last few years at the store, and he's a union steward. He's also a father to 7 children, and getting kids back to school safely has been on his mind. Eduardo?
Thank you, Mark. Great to meet you again, Secretary Cardona. How's it going? I have several kids in school, and virtual learning has been a real challenge. My daughter, Faith, works with me at King Soopers and has struggled virtual learning in isolation. She misses her friends and, just the regular day-to-day things that she does at school. Virtual learning has been hard because of the regular internet connection or the computer not working. Faith hasn't had, access to that. Just the challenge of getting online, logged in, and can deter the kids from getting to the virtual school on time. I guess what I'm asking, my question was, what are we going to do to catch up our kids that have fallen in virtual learning, both with studies and interacting with their classmates?
How old is Faith?
She's 16 right now.
16.
Yeah.
What I could tell you in Faith is that I understand what you're going through. I have a 16-year-old myself, and I saw the impact of virtual learning for a child that's, at that age, you really want to be around your friends. You really want to be engaging in that social and emotional, those experiences of high school that we can all remember when we were in high school. Well, it was disrupted for our students. So that social and emotional piece is critically important. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Eduardo. And you mentioned something else that was a priority for us when we talked about reopening schools. I mentioned the food, but soon after that, we were working really hard to close the digital divide. right? So some students have better access to internet than others. Some students have devices and others don't. And we have some cases, maybe that was the case with your family, you have 7 children trying to share the bandwidth of the internet that's not intended for 5 or 6 live meetings at the same time. So the rescue plan and the infrastructure plan provide resources to close the digital divide, to provide access to broadband, to provide devices for students so that they can have access. But I think the more important thing here, especially for Faith, is getting Faith back into the classroom as quickly as possible, as safely as possible. That's where she learns best. And what we need to do is make sure that we're providing safe environments, but also investing in intervention and support processes for students that missed out on a lot. You know, the budget provides $20 billion for Title I, an increase of $20 billion, making it $36 billion, which is intended, again, to provide support in those places where students need it the most, where they were impacted by the pandemic the most. So there's funds intended to provide support for students, technology, broadband, but also that social and emotional well-being that school counselors provide, that school social workers provide. And, you know, hopefully they're using some of these funds for field trips and things that are engaging. I can tell you that for my 16-year-old, what he missed the most are the trips at the end of the year. I'm hoping that some of the rescue plan could give Faith an opportunity to get on a school bus and go on a field trip with her friends, the way 16-year-olds are supposed to learn.
Mr. Secretary, I want to introduce you to our third member, Talisha Thomas. She's worked at Kroger's for 20 plus years in Southwest Ohio. She's been a steward at her local 75 for over 12 years. Talisha has covered just about every department in her tenure at Kroger and now works in file maintenance. She's a mother of 2 children, 8 and 12. Talisha, would you like to share your perspective on how your children have navigated schooling during the pandemic?
Yes, thank you, Mark. And hello again, Secretary. My children go to an online school, so their transition during the pandemic hasn't been as disruptive as most, with them doing in-person schooling. Both of my kids are very outgoing, though. My daughter loves to dance, which is very hard over Zoom. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's kind of weird. My son loves to play the drums. Now, I want them to have the opportunity to go back to in-person public schooling once he hits high school, so he can participate in things like band. But I took them out of in-person schooling because of the high teacher-student ratio with children not getting the one-on-one attention that they need so that they can learn properly. So I was wondering how that would work with them going back to school.
Right. So I agree with you that having students, especially after the pandemic, in class sizes that are reasonable makes sense. Students are going to come back with all different levels of readiness, not only academically, but they've experienced different levels of trauma. We know that many families lost loved ones, or they had to move, or they experienced job loss in their family. So it's really important that we provide that support for our students with reasonable class size, reasonable ratios for our school social workers and school counselors. So again, the rescue plan, what it does is provide funds so that there are no layoffs. And so additional teachers could be hired to provide better class sizes, to help catch the kids up quicker, to have school nurses available to students, to have school counselors, as I mentioned before, to have better connections with the families. So the funds are there for staff members to increase the level of support that they provide students, which means that class sizes should be reasonable next year. There's no reason why it shouldn't be if the American Rescue Plan pumped $130 billion into our schools to make sure things are better. That's not to count the money from last year's out of ESSERS that states have received. So it's really making sure that the dollars are getting into the classrooms to do what they were intended to do.
Mr. Secretary, we have one final question. I'm sharing this question from a 400 member, Tanya Seeley. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today because of a work conflict, but we really wanted, her to participate in today's event. So she asked us to ask the question for her. She's worked at Kroger for 22 years in Norfolk. She's a steward with her local, and up until the pandemic, Tanya worked full time. But she had to stay at home with her son, Christopher, to help him with his virtual learning. So she reduced her hours and works a very strenuous schedule from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. so she could be home during the day to help Christopher. Her son, Christopher, is 9 years old and is autistic. He has an individualized education plan. And when the shutdown happened, it was very hard to get him comfortable with the new routine, which was, Tanya being his teacher. So before the pandemic, her son had regular speech therapy and other special support for his IEP from the district. Now, if he's lucky, he gets 15 to 20 minutes of speech therapy every other week. He also learns from being with other students, but that's been very limited since school. As it started virtually, it's been virtual, and now are only back to classroom sessions twice a week. The consistent and constant adjustment to routines for Christopher is very hard. He needs to be in a clear, stable routine for his autism. Tanya literally writes his routine up on the wall in his room. What are we doing to ensure children like Christopher have the support that they need to make up for lost time, and to also ensure that the children with special needs have the additional support that they need moving forward?
Tanya's, I've heard from parents who have similar situations as Tanya. Tanya, I tip my hat to you. The challenge of the pandemic is greater when you have students who the laptop is not good enough. We know that students with disabilities, in particular students with autism or on the spectrum, don't benefit as much with the online learning as other students who might not have autism. So it's really important that we do everything in our power to get those students back in safely as quickly as possible. They deserve it. And we have to do everything we can to do that. So, to help support students like Tanya's child, we have to make sure that we're providing summer learning opportunities that help them recover whatever skills they weren't able to get this past year. To make sure that we're doubling down on our efforts to expose them to the skills that they need, skills that maybe were more difficult to teach online. And the rescue plan puts $3 billion towards special education to make sure that we have enough support staff to do this work, special education teachers, interventionists, or whether it's ABA or different format, different therapists, to give students like Tanya's child the best recovery plan possible to get the skills that he or she needs to be successful and thrive. So the American Rescue Plan does put $3 billion for that. It puts additional money specifically for summer school programming so that students like Tanya's could get the benefit of those funds and accelerate the recovery of those skills that were not gained during the pandemic. But again, thank you, Tanya, for what you've done to support your child's learning and to partner with the schools to make the best situation out of a very tough time for our country, in particular for parents of students with disabilities.
Secretary Cardona, on behalf of our 1.3 million members, we want to thank you for your time and for sharing how we will safely reopen our schools later this year. Please know that the UFCW stands ready to work with you and the administration to help ensure that the concerns of our members and all essential workers are addressed, that our schools will indeed be safe places to learn again. Again, thank you, and please feel free to share any closing thoughts that you'd like to the group.
Sure. Well, thank you again for the invitation, President Perone. You know, I think the parting message here is that it's really important that you continue to advocate for your children. You know, you are your child's first and most influential teacher. We play a supportive role. And it's really important that we set up systems where we're listening to you as parents. Continue to advocate. You know your children better than anyone else, so you know what they need. Continue to advocate, continue to work with us. Know that, you know, as we recover from the pandemic, we're gonna need to hear from you. Even when things are challenging, it's not gonna be simple. We've gone through a lot. So let's go back in it with a spirit of collaboration. Let's all do our part to make sure that our students with disabilities, our students that are bilingual get the support that they need, our students that are hungry get fed, our students that are sad or have experienced trauma get the support that they need. Let's all do our part to get vaccinated. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, get vaccinated. That's how we can help make sure our reopening is safe. You know, I want to let you know, en la unión está la fuerza. Together we are stronger than we are separate. Thank you for what you do to support your workers, to increase voice, and know that our students need that voice as well. So partner with us in our educational system to make sure that they get the best education possible. They deserve it, and it's our job to make sure it happens. So thanks again for your time. I appreciate the invitation. All right.